Fear no one is an intriguing 3 words. You know, on the one hand, you just look at it, it seems very encouraging. Fear no one. You know, God is on our side, as one minister put it just a few weeks ago. Our God is bigger than any virus. So it seems kind of encouraging in that way. But as I said, it's kind of intriguing because the more I thought about it, the more I realized how often passages like this, similar passages, have been misused. I mean, the fact that God is more powerful than any virus does not prevent us from being prudent when it comes to gathering together as a group here. And I was reminded of a gentleman, true story, by the way. My parents knew this guy who was so convinced that he should not fear any human being and was so convinced that the Lord had counted the days of his life that evidently he rarely stopped at stop signs. He would just plow through them, thinking that, well, if this is my day, then it's my day, which seems like a very bad misuse of the confidence that Jesus gives us. And so I was really struggling with a little bit about, well, what does Jesus say here in this when he is telling us not to fear anyone? With the disciples, he's about to send them out on a mission trip. And so I think he's trying to encourage them, pointing out to them that, yeah, you're going to run into some trouble along the way, but that's okay. Fear no one. But I don't think he's encouraging them to be foolhardy, you know, to just, you know, don't be sensitive to people's needs or anything like that. I don't think he's trying to get them killed or to suggest for them that no matter what they do, God will protect them. I don't know that that's true. And it dawned on me that maybe a better way for you and I to listen to it would be as if Jesus is saying to us, don't get distracted. Because if you think about it, that would have been the issue for the disciples. They would have gone out and maybe somebody did not welcome them, a town did not welcome them. And that might have distracted them. They might have said, oh, I didn't do that very well, so the next town I go to, I need to change the message to make it more agreeable. And it's almost as if Jesus is saying, no. If they reject you, just let that go. Just let that go. Don't be distracted by that. Don't feel like you have to change anything because of that. You're fine. And if somebody was insulting them, you know, Jesus is almost saying to them, look, you know, don't worry about that. Let that go. Let that go. Don't be distracted by somebody just yelling and screaming at you. You're fine. And I just wondered if that is a lesson for us. Because as I started to think about this, I started to appreciate the fact that it is a thought that might be very helpful in our day-to-day lives. So let me start with an example for the teenagers here. I can tell you for the adults, you want to get a good discussion started, all you have to do is ask teenagers under what circumstances it would be okay to cheat on a test in school. Because every teenager will tell you that it's not right to cheat on tests. But it's not too hard to give them a reason where they'll sort of like, oh, well, in that case. For example, for an older high school student, if mom and dad say straight A's equals a car. I will get you your own car if you can come up with straight A's. Well, suddenly the idea of not cheating comes into question. But if you think about it, the best way to handle a situation like that, any kind of moral question, is simply to say, I don't want to get distracted by stuff that doesn't matter. You know, it's not right to cheat. That's a form of lying. We're not supposed to lie. That's just wrong. And as long as I stick to that, I'm fine. But the new car or whatever the other circumstances are, those are things that are just trying to distract us away. For the adults, you run into this if you ever talk to somebody perhaps about euthanasia. They'll get distracted from life by talking about the quality of life. Oh, but they're just languishing. That it's just an argument to distract. And if you just say no, I know what's going on here. Life is sacred. We don't take life, and all that other stuff just disappears, and you're in a good spot. Many of you have lived this out over the last couple of months. This idea of not being distracted in your Christian walk. As a disciple, we are called to give. How much and to what extent and all that stuff, that's for you to work out with the good Lord. But we're called to give of our time, our talent, and our treasure. And because you could not come to church, that meant that it was harder for you to give, especially offering. But so many people in this parish were not distracted by the fact that they could not attend Mass. They found ways to get their offering to us. What they had committed to doing, they just kept doing that. They put it in the mail, they dropped it by, put it in the mail slot themselves. They did all sorts of things. People signed up for online giving who probably don't actually like online giving, but it was a way to fulfill that obligation. They were not distracted by all sorts of stuff, nor were they distracted by the economic news. In situations like this, lots of people would have sort of been distracted. Well, I don't know, I might not have enough money next month, and they would have just said, well, I better keep it all. But they were not distracted by any of that stuff, and just faithfully kept giving what they were able to give. It's a great example of that. And for those of you that watch the news and are interested in, social issues, I would suggest to you that this is a wonderful strategy. Take race relationship and police and all that stuff. A lot of the arguments boil down to blame. A lot of people, that's what they want to talk about. Well, the reason this is the way it is because of this. But I would suggest to you that a lot of those arguments are just distracting. Because what is the central issue? The central issue is that we are all made in the image and likeness of God. That God loves all of us equally. He does not love one group more than another. He does not favor one group more than another. And that my task in this world is to live that out, is to treat everyone equally. And so rather than getting distracted by commentators who yell and scream about all sorts of stuff and exaggerate things and whatever, I just need to put all that aside and do the one thing that I can do, which is treat people well. I can't change policing in the United States. I can't change past history of the United States, but I can be very certain that when I'm in a store and I am dealing with someone who does not look like me, I treat them the way I want to be treated myself. Because is that not what the good Lord told us? Do two things. Love God, love your neighbor. That's all I got to do. The rest of it, I think, is just distracting me from that. It's attempting to give me an excuse. Oh, I get to love these neighbors, but not these neighbors. I'm just being taken aside. If you're thinking about the issue of, public naming of buildings and statues and all that stuff, there's lots of really good arguments. I could have a wonderful discussion with you. I can argue both sides of this, by the way. But I wonder at times if all those arguments, even a really good argument about, well, what is the proper thing in terms of civil society? Why do we put people's names on buildings? Why do we erect statues? What are we trying to do? What is the sort of the philosophical point of all that? You can get into that, and that might be very interesting and helpful. But I just wonder if all that stuff, no matter how good it is, distracts me from the fact that there are a significant group of people who are offended by something? And do I have an obligation to that? Because would I want to intentionally offend my neighbor? Is that what Jesus tells me to do? Even if I don't agree with it, maybe I want to decide, well, what's more important, the intellectual argument or this person, a person? Jesus always reminds us that people come first. And even if I don't agree with it, maybe I'm just getting distracted, and maybe I just need to say, in this case, if it helps somebody else, that's what we'll do. I don't know if that's the right answer to the question, but I do know it's important for me not to get distracted. I need to stick to what Jesus teaches me. And Jesus is teaching the disciples, look, when you go out to the villages and the towns, some things are going to happen. Just don't get distracted about that. Just keep doing what I have taught you. Keep doing what I have told you. And I think you and I can do that in all sorts of areas. Just not get distracted by the news, by our favorite commentator, by our favorite politician. Let's not get distracted by them. Let's go back and ask ourselves, what does Jesus want us to do in this moment? I will tell you that in some of these areas, we may disagree about what Jesus would want us to do. And I think that's okay. That's healthy conversation. But let's be careful about the conversation, that we don't end up talking about things that do not actually matter. I was reflecting on this in my own life. There are lots of times when I could tell you where I myself have gotten distracted. Just started looking at the wrong place for answers, so to speak. Whether that was a particular news station or whatever it was. And yet, I think that now, as I look back on it, the smoothest times of my life was when, if you will, when I wanted to turn on the news, the first thing I turned on was Jesus, in essence. What does God want of me in this moment? And it all boils down to people. We want to love people. We want to act the way we want them to treat us. It's that simple, even though it also is that hard to do. But I encourage you to give this some thought. It becomes a bit of a filter by way to watch the news. Is this story, is this person's opinion, is it distracting me from Jesus, or is it drawing me towards Jesus? And if it's drawing you towards Jesus, stick with it, absolutely. If it's distracting you, then I think it's time to turn it off.